What makes a wild and powerful creature trust your life to a fragile boy forgotten around the world? In a trail abandoned by the memory of men, an unlikely meeting between innocence and brute force begins a journey of loyalty that challenges logic and moves the hardest hearts. When a poor boy finds a magnificent bull by death, he does not see a threat or a prize, but a life that needs to be saved. Little does he know that his act of compassion will trigger a series of miraculous events, arousing an old legend and causing a reaction to the animal that will shock an entire village and change his destiny forever. Get ready to discover the secret kept on the forgotten trail, a story about how a pure heart can find the most unexpected and grandiose of rewards. The dust climbed thin and golden, dancing in the sunny beams that cut the serrato canopy of the forest. Leo was walking barefoot, the red and dirty skin of the red earth that was both his cradle and his fell. The forgotten trail, as the elders called her, was a path few dare to go. They spoke of ancient spirits and wild animals, but for Leo, it was just a shortcut, a way to shorten the long journey back to the clay record where his grandmother was waiting for him. The boy, from his 12, carried a much heavier burden on his shoulders than the bag of sweet potatoes that hung from his back. He carried poverty, hunger, and the loneliness that echoed in the silence of that dense forest. His parents, taken by a fever that swept the village years earlier, were only faded portraits in the memory and wall of the room. He had his grandmother, a woman with calloused hands and tired eyes, who was looking for the hope of better days for her grandson. And it was for her rare smile and her warm hug, that Leo faced the world and the forgotten trail every day. Life had taught him to be strong, to observe the details, to read the signs of nature as an open book. Each leaf, each broken branch told a story. The sun was beginning to say goodbye, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, when a strange sound broke the monotony of his footsteps. It was not the pyre of a bird or the rustle of an armadillo. It was a low, deep moan, a lament that seemed to sprout from the bowels of the earth itself. Leo stopped, his small heart beating unzipped in his chest. Fear, a constant companion, whispered in his ear to run, to abandon whatever he was facing there and seek the safety of home. But curiosity, this driving force of childhood, spoke louder. And there was something more, an innate compassion that impelled him not to turn his back on the suffering of others, whether human or animal. He squeezed the potato bag strap, the family weight giving him a false sense of courage. He deeply took the wet air of the forest, impregnated with the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves, and decided to deviate from the main path. That sound, that lament of pain, called him in a way he couldn't ignore. It was as if fate was introducing him to a new crossroads on that trail already so spent at his feet. With the caution of a hunter, Leo advanced between the ferns and the thorny shrubs. The sound became clearer with each step, a heavy and intermittent reshape. The boy felt the sweat drip by his forehead, mingling with the dust of the way. His eyes, large and attentive, searched the dim light, trying to identify the source of that suffering. He clung to the trees to balance the irregular terrain, his heart hammering the ribs. He imagined a jaguar stuck in a trap, a deer wounded by a fall. The danger was real, palpable, but the boy's determination was greater. He needed to see, needed to know. The responsibility he felt was not logical, was not taught. It was part of it, forged in the hardness of its short existence. Empathy is often the brightest jewel in poverty, for those who know the pain closely cannot be indifferent to it. And Leo, in his children's purity, carried this jewel in the chest without even knowing its value, guided by an instinct that differentiated it. Finally, he pushed a last wide leaf of palm, and his eyes widened. There, lying in a small clearing, was a bull, but it was not a common bull, like those he saw in the colonel's pastures. This was magnificent, of an ebony color that seemed to absorb the little light that was still left. Its muscles were powerful, even in the immobility of unconsciousness. It had a real size, almost mythical. One of the rear paws was arrested horribly at a deep slit between two rocks, and an ugly wound at his head indicated the cause of his state. The animal was immovable, the weak breathing almost imperceptible. An aura of power and tragedy emanated from that scene. Leo was paralyzed for a moment, the mixture of admiration and dread taking over himself. He was the most imposing creature he has ever seen in his entire life, and he was dying there alone on the trail that everyone had forgotten. The injustice of that vision hurt the boy's heart in a deep way. Beauty and strength surrendered to a foolish accident, to the cruel chance of nature. Fear gave way to a wave of urgency. Leo dropped his bag of potatoes and approached slowly, with his hands extended in a gesture of peace, as if the animal could see him. "Calm down, Big. Calm," he whispered, his trembling voice. "I won't hurt you. I will help you." The bull did not move. The boy touched his fingertips the black man and felt a slight tremor through his massive body. It was alive. There was hope. Without thinking twice, Leo began to examine the situation. The paw was firmly stuck, swollen and probably broken. Alone, he would never have the strength to move the rocks. The wound on the head bleeding slowly, staining the earth around. He needed water, something to clean the wound, a plane. The boy's mind, used to solving problems with scarce resources, began working at high speed. The sun was already completely complete, and the darkness of the night would bring with it the cold and the predators. Time was your enemy. He ran to a small stream that served not far away. He wore his skilled straw hat like a makeshift bucket, filling it with fresh and crystal-clear water. He ran back, his heart to the heels. With a piece of his own torn shirt, without hesitation, he began to clean the wound on the bull's head with a delicacy that contrasted with his dirty and heating hands. The animal moaned, a guttural sound that made Leo's body shiver, but he didn't stop. "Gee, everything will be fine. I'm here with you. You're not alone," he repeated, more to himself than to the unconscious creature. With each gesture, with every word of comfort, an invisible bond began to form in that isolated clearing. It was the union of two soliditians, that of the boy forgotten by the world, and the bull forgotten by luck. A silent pact of mutual aid, sealed by compassion and vulnerability. The night fell, and the forest filled with unknown sounds, but Leo was no longer afraid. I had a purpose. The jaw was the biggest challenge. Leo tried to push the rocks with all his weight, the fragile muscles retesting in a useless effort. The stones did not move a millimeter. He looked around, desperate, seeking a solution. His eyes landed in a thick, resistant tree branch, fallen nearby. A lever. Hope rekindled. He dragged his heavy trunk, positioning him carefully in the slit. He used a smaller stone as a support point and threw his entire body over the wood. He gritted his teeth, sweat blinding his eyes. The wood moaned under the pressure. For a moment, nothing happened. He tried again and again with the energy of despair, and then he heard a snap. The larger rock moved, just a few centimeters, but it was enough. With a last Herculean effort, he was able to create an opening so that the bull's paw could be released. The boy fell to the ground, exhausted, panting, but with a glow of triumph in his eyes. With the finally free, though terribly swollen paw, Leo focused on keeping the bull heated. The night in the woods was cold, and the injured animal could not resist. He joined all the dry leaves he could find, creating a kind of makeshift bed around the massive body. He covered the animal with ferns and palm leaves, trying to improvise a shelter against the serene. The boy cringed beside the bull, sharing the little warmth his small body could offer. He did not think of his worried grandmother, did not think of the hunger that snored in his stomach. His only concern was that black giant that fate had put in his way. He spoke to his bull in whispers, telling about his life, about his dreams, about the stars that began to blink through the treetops. And in the middle of the dark, cold night, on the forgotten trail, a poor boy and a dying bull sailed together, waiting for the sunrise, not knowing that that night would change their lives forever. Exhaustion finally beat the little hero. With his head gently supported on the flank of the big animal, Leo fell asleep. His sleep was deep, packed with the smooth and almost imperceptible rhythm of bull breeding. He dreamed of green and vast fields where he ran free, hungry and without worry. In the dream, the bull ran beside him, not like a cargo animal, but as a companion, a guardian. The moon cast a silver light on the clearing. wrapping them in a magical and ethereal glow. The silence of the night was broken only by the cawing of the crickets and the murmur of the wind on the leaves. There, at that moment, there was no poverty or pain, only the peace of two souls who found themselves in adversity. The forgotten trail, usually a place of passage and loneliness, had become a sanctuary, a stage for an act of pure goodness. And as the boy slept, the great bull, for the first time in hours, moved his head slightly, and one of his deep, dark eyes opened, fixing himself in the small being bent beside him. An ancestral consciousness seemed to awaken in his gaze. The first light of the morning was shyly filtered by the foliage, bringing with it the bird's corner and a new hope. Leo woke up with his painful body and clothes humid by dew. For a moment, confused, he didn't know where he was. Then he felt the warmth of his massive body beside him, and the memory of the previous night returned in full force. He sat abruptly, his eyes seeking the bull. The animal was awake. His eyes, large, dark like oil wells, were fixed on the boy. There were no fury or fear Leo would expect from a wild and wounded creature, but a disconcerting calm, an intelligence that seemed to cure off his soul. The bull tried to get up, but a moan of pain made him collapse again. The rear paw was very swollen, unusable. Leo knew that the hardest part of his mission was just beginning. Save the bull from an immediate death had been one thing. Ensuring its survival would be another, much more complex. He needed food, medicine, a plan. The decision to stay and help was irrefutable, was recorded in his heart. Leo's first instinct went to get water. He redid the way to the stream, this time carrying a large shell-shaped sheet that improvised as a bowl. He made several trips, patiently offering fresh water to the bull, which eagerly drank, the rough tongue brushing the boy's hands. The touch was not aggressive, but delicate, almost a thank you. Then the hunger, its own and that of the animal. He remembered the sweet potato bag, left behind in the hurry of the night before. He ran to pick him up, his heart relieved to find him intact. He shared the little he had. He peeled a potato with his small knife and offered the pieces to the bull. The animal smelled the food with suspicion, but seeing Leo eating too, began to chew slowly. For himself, Leo kept the slightest part. The strength of that giant depended on food, and he would do whatever it took to provide it. The boy spent hours exploring the surroundings, seeking wild fruits, roots, and leaves that knew to be edible for him and his new friend. The forest, once a place of passage, had become his pantry. The days have become a routine of care and dedication. The wound in the bull's head was beginning to heal, thanks to the constant cleaning that Leo did with stream water and leaves with medicinal properties that his grandmother had taught him to identify. The paw, however, was the biggest concern. It was clearly broken. Leo, with her children's and practical wisdom, knew she needed to immobilize her. He found 2 straight and strong branches, and using all the vine fibers he managed to start, improvised a rudimentary splint. Tying that on the bull's paw would be dangerous. Any sudden movement of the animal could hurt you severely. He approached slowly, speaking in a calm and reassuring tone. "I need to do that, buddy. It's for your good. Trust me, please." The bull looked at him fixedly, as if he understood each word. And to Leo's astonishment, he remained completely motionless, while the boy, with trembling hands, tied the makeshift splint to his injured leg. The confidence that the animal placed on him was a gift, an immense responsibility. As he took care of the bull, whom he had come to call Thunder because of the dark color and the contained force, Leo forgot his own life. He had not returned home. He imagined his grandmother's concern, and his heart hurt with the guilt. But how could you leave Thunder? And how could you explain to your grandmother that she was in the forest taking care of an injured bull? She would think he had gone crazy. Then he remained, postponing the inevitable, waiting for a miracle. The struggle for Thunder's life had become his own struggle. He lost weight, the bones of the most protruding face, the sunburned skin, but his eyes shone with a fierce determination. He learned to follow the traces of other animals to find food sources, to build more efficient rain shelters using braided palm leaves. The forest was transforming him, sharpening his instincts, making him stronger, more resilient. He was no longer just a poor boy. He was a survivor, a guardian. One afternoon, a storm collapsed over the woods. The rain fell into torrents, and the rays cut the sky. Leo and Thunder sheltered under a great rock formation, but the cold was intense. The boy was shaking uncontrollably, his teeth hitting. Thunder, realizing the state of his small caregiver, dragged himself with difficulty, using his 3 good paws, and positioned himself to protect Leo from wind and rain. He laid his huge head on the boy's lap and wrapped him with the warmth of his body. Leo, surprised and thrilled, hugged the bull's neck, burying his face in his thick hair. At that moment, the papers were reversed. The caregiver became Care. The wounded giant protected his savior. The bond between them has deepened, transcending logic, becoming primal and powerful. The storm roared outside, but in the small shelter there was only the warmth of loyalty and mutual affection. They did not need words to communicate. Their hearts spoke the same language. The days passed, and the Thunderpaw showed signs of improvement. He could already support a little of his weight on her, and the makeshift splint seemed to be working. Leo felt a huge pride, a joy he had never experienced before. Seeing Thunder recovering was the greatest reward for all his sacrifice. He spent hours talking to the bull, telling him stories, sharing his fears and his most secret dreams. And Thunder heard with his wise and patient eyes, occasionally responding with a low, smooth mute, as if commenting on the boy's accounts. For anyone who saw the scene, it would be the image of madness, a dirty, thin boy talking to a wild bull in the middle of nowhere. But for them, it was the world, a world that had built together based on trust and affection. The Forgotten Trail was now their home, a particular kingdom where the rules of society did not apply. However, the reality of the outside world began to infiltrate its sanctuary. Village hunters, attracted by the promise of full meat, began to attend the region with more attendance. Leo heard the distant sound of the shots and the bark of the dogs, and his heart filled with dread. He knew that Thunder, with its imposing color and its size, would be a coveted trophy. The struggle for life was now gaining a new outline. It was no longer just against nature and injuries, but against the cruelty of men. Leo became even more vigilant, erasing his tracks, looking for more hidden places to shelter with Thunder. He felt the fear of the bull, the tension in his muscles each time a human sound broke the silence of the forest. The responsibility of protecting his friend weighed on his small shoulders, but he would not be weak. He had saved him once and would save him again, however many times it was needed. One morning, the danger came too close. 2 hunters, following the trail of an animal, passed a few meters from the clearing where Leo and Thunder were. The boy arrested his breath, his heart in his throat. He made a sign of silence to Thunder, placing his finger on his lips. The bull, as if perfectly understood the danger, remained absolutely motionless, confusing itself with the shadows of dense vegetation. The men talked loudly, their rude voices breaking the harmony of the forest. They talked about a legendary black bull, who said they wandered through those woods, a prize that would be worth a fortune. Leo froze. They were talking about Thunder. For a miracle, the hunters did not see them and followed their way, disappearing in the woods. Leo let out the air in a trembling sigh, hugging the neck of Thunder. The danger had passed for now. But the boy knew it was a matter of time until they were discovered. The fight for life was far from over. That episode lit a new sense of urgency in Leo. Thunder was stronger, almost fully recovered. Maybe it was time to leave. But where? They could not stay in the forest forever, and certainly could not go to the village. The dilemma tormented the boy. He sat in front of the bull, his face contoured by concern. "What are we going to do, Thunder? Where are we going?" The bull stared at him with his deep eyes and then stepped forward with his now healed paw. He gave a slight header towards an even denser and unexplored part of the forest, a path that he didn't even know. It was as if he were suggesting an escape route, a way to safety. Leo looked in the indicated direction, to the darkness of the unknown. She was afraid, but looking at the eyes of Thunder again, she saw confidence. And he trusted Thunder more than he trusted anything else in the world. The decision was made. They would leave the trail forgotten behind and venture together in the unknown. The struggle for life continued. The journey to the unknown began under a gray sky. Led by Thunder, they entered a part of the forest that seemed untouched by man. The vegetation was denser, the older and older trees. Leo followed the bull, fully trusting in his instinct. Thunder moved with surprising security, as if he knew that way, as if he was coming home. He opened a passage with his powerful corpus, driving away branches and shrubs, making the walk easier for the boy who followed him. The bond between them, forged in care and danger, strengthened with each step. It was no longer just a boy and an animal. They were companions of travel, partners in an adventure imposed by fate. Leo watched fascinated the intelligence of the bull, the way he seemed to read the topography, always choosing the safest route, avoiding marshes and paradors. There was an ancestral wisdom in Thunder's movements, something that went far beyond animal instinct. It was as if he carried the map of that ancient forest in himself. Walking days revealed even more surprising facets of Thunder's personality. The bull was not just a guide, it was a provider. He wore his horns to shake fruit trees, causing sleeves and cashews to fall to Leo. He sniffed and dug the earth with his paws, unearthing nutritious roots that the boy had learned to cook on small bonfires. Once, when Leo slipped on a smooth stone by a river and was almost taken by the current, Thunder entered the water without hesitation, positioning his body like a barrier and pushing the boy into the safe margin. Leo's gratitude became a deep, almost reverent admiration. That was not an ordinary animal. There was a purpose in his actions, an intentionality that challenged any logical explanation. The boy felt that he had not only saved the life of the bull, he had aroused something, released a spirit that was asleep. The nights were moments of deep connection. Sitting around a small bonfire that Leo lit to ward off insects and cold, they shared a comfortable silence. Leo told about the village, about his grandmother, about the dream of one day having new shoes. Thunder heard, his big head resting on his paws, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Sometimes he issued a low mute, a vibration that Leo felt all over his body, as an answer, a consolation. The boy learned to interpret the different sounds that the bull emitted, the contentment buffet, the warning growl, the soft moan of affection. They developed their own language, a communication that dismissed words. Leo used to lie down on the warm flank of Thunder, feeling the rhythmic descend and descend from his breathing, and fell asleep feeling safer than he had ever felt in his life. The loneliness that had accompanied him for so long had dissipated. In a late afternoon, after many days of walking, Thunder led them to a magical place. It was a hidden valley, surrounded by rocky walls, and cut by a waterfall that flowed into an incredibly blue water lake. The vegetation was lush, and the air was pure and fresh. It looked like a secret paradise, an isolated sanctuary from the rest of the world. Thunder stopped by the lake and drank for a long time, then turned to Leo and emitted a different sound, a mudgy that sounded like triumph. That was fate. That was what this safe place he was looking for. Leo looked around, amazed. He never saw anything so beautiful. There were fruit trees everywhere, and the grass was green and soft. It was a place where they could live in peace, far from the hunters and the cruelty of the world. He ran to the water and dived, washing the tiredness and dust of weeks. Thunder entered behind him, playing in the water like a puppy, sneezing water with the muzzle, a vision that made Leo laugh with pure joy. In that valley, their friendship flourished to its fullest. Free from the constant threat, they explored every corner of that paradise. Leo built a small shelter for himself near the waterfall, using branches, vines, and palm leaves. Thunder seemed glad to graze freely, but never moved much from his human friend. He seemed to have taken the role of guardian of the valley and Leo. The boy noticed even weaker behaviors. Thunder seemed to have an affinity with the other animals in the valley. Birds landed on his back, and small monkeys approached without fear. It was as if all beings in that place recognized the special nature of the great black bull. Leo felt that he was living in a fairy tale, a magical reality he had helped to create himself. The bond between them was living proof that compassion could generate miracles, that goodness could transform reality. One day, while exploring a cave behind the waterfall, Leo found something extraordinary. On the walls of the cave, there were old rock paintings. They were hunter designs, forest animals, but an image stood out, repeating itself several times. It was the design of a great black bull, identical to Thunder. In some paintings, the bull was portrayed with a luminous aura around him, and in others, it appeared alongside human figures in an attitude of protection. Leo's heart accelerated. Would it be possible? Was Thunder a descendant of that legendary bull? Or was he the bull himself, a protective spirit of the forest that manifested from time to time? The mystery around his friend deepened. He was not just the bull who was fortunate to be saved by a boy. There was a greater purpose in his encounter, a destination that was beginning to reveal himself on the walls of that secret cave. Leo never told Thunder about the paintings. How could you? But your gaze to your friend changed, began to see it with a new reverence. Gratitude gave way to a kind of devotion. He now understood that the bond that united them was old, written in the stones, echoed through the centuries. Thunder was not your pet. He was an entity, a force of nature. And Leo had been chosen to be his companion, his human guardian. This perception did not scare him. On the contrary, gave him a sense of purpose that he had never imagined having. He, the poor, forgotten boy, was part of something grand, a much older story than himself. The responsibility was immense, but his heart was full of serene courage. He accepted his role with the humility and dignity that life had taught him. Life in the valley was idyllic, but the longing for his grandmother tightened Leo's chest. He wondered if she would still be alive, if she thought about him. He shared this anguish with Thunder during his night conversations. The bull seemed to understand his pain. One night, after a particularly emotional outburst of Leo, Thunder stood up and walked to the exit of the valley, looking toward where they came. Then he turned to Leo and stared at him, as if to say, "I will take you back, but we will not come back as before." Leo understood the message. The time in the valley had been preparation, a strengthening. Now they were ready to face the world again, but together. The idea of returning filled him with fear and hope. Fear of what they would find, of the hunters, the judgment of the people. Hope to reunite with his grandmother, and perhaps build a new life. A life where he and Thunder could be together, safely. The valley departure was melancholy. That paradise had been the cradle of his friendship, the place where they healed and strengthened. But they could not live isolated forever. Thunder, once again, took the lead, guiding Leo on a different path, a route that seemed safer, bypassing the known hunting areas. The bond between them was now unbreakable, tested by suffering, solidified by loyalty, and blessed by an ancestral mystery. Leo was no longer the scared boy who had found a dying bull. He was a brave young man, accompanied by a legendary guardian. They were not running away, they were returning, and the world had no idea what was coming. The return to the forgotten trail would be the beginning of the next chapter, where the unexpected bond that united them would be revealed and tested in ways they could not even imagine. The return to the village was a shock. The world of men seemed noisy and dirty after the peace of the secret valley. Leo felt the curious and suspicious glances of the few people he found along the way. A ragged boy walking beside a colossal black bull was not a common vision. He kept Thunder hidden in the woods as he went, alone and with a tight heart, to his grandmother's shack. The old lady, seeing him, cried and hugged him with a force that denied her age. She had thought he was dead, taken by some forest beast. Leo, in tears, tried to explain what had happened. He spoke of the injured bull, how he took care of him, and the friendship that was born. His grandmother heard him with a mixture of relief and unbelief. A wild, wild bull let a boy take care of it? It looked like a fisherman's story, a delirium caused by time alone in the woods. She loved her grandson, but the seed of doubt was planted. The news of the return of Leo and his Tauro towns spread through the village as fire in dry straw. The distrust was the general reaction. People, accustomed to the hardness of life and the brutality of nature, could not conceive of such a story. "This boy is lying," some said. "It's witchcraft, evil, whispering others. The figure of Thunder, when it was finally seen at a distance, only increased fear. His grandeur, his colorless night color, the intelligent look that seemed to penetrate people's soul, all fed fear and superstition. The children were forbidden to approach Leo, and the adults looked at him with a mixture of fear and revulsion. The boy, who was once just poor, was now also the weird, the bull boy. The loneliness he had thought to have left behind again haunted him, now in a much more cruel way, because he was imposed by his own people. The region's colonel, a rude and powerful man named Batista, owner of almost every land, was one of those who heard the story, and he didn't like what he heard. Years ago, a award-winning bull, pure race and black coat like Thunder, had disappeared from his farm. The animal, which was worth a fortune, had been dead as dead, victim of cattle thieves or some jaguar. Upon learning of Leo's animal, greed and suspicion were lit in Batista. Accompanied by his henchmen, he went to Leo's horn. It did not approach, afraid of the bull that fired quietly at a safe distance, but shouted his accusations. "This bull is mine! It was stolen from my farm! You're a little thief, just like all the poor in this region!" Leo's grandmother tried to defend her grandson, but the colonel's voice was higher, her power unquestionable for most. The threat was made. Either Leo returned the bull, or would suffer the consequences. The mystery around Thunder thickened. Was he the colonel's lost bull? Leo refused to believe. The bond they had, the intelligence, the almost magical behavior of the animal, that could not belong to a man as Datus. But the doubt eroded him. He approached Thunder, who was oblivious to confusion, and sought a mark, a sign of iron that all the colonel's animals had. He examined the bull's leather everywhere, his heart hitting hard, and found nothing. Absolutely no mark. A huge relief flooded him. Thunder did not belong to the colonel, but that only increased the mystery. Where did he come from then? Who was he? The absence of the brand, instead of solving the problem, complicated it even more. For the colonel, this was proof that Leo had used some device to erase the brand, making his crime even more serious. The situation was becoming dangerous. The distrust of the village, instigated by the colonel, became an open hostility. Stones were thrown toward Thunder when he drank water in the stream. Leo's little mowing of corn was trampled at night. Anonymous threats were left at the door of the shack. Leo lived in a constant warning state, fear for Thunder overcoming fear for himself. He spent the nights in clear, watching, for fear that the colonel's henchmen tried to tie the bull by force. Thunder, in turn, seemed to feel the tension. He always kept himself close to Leo and his grandmother, his body tense, his eyes attentive to any suspicious movement. His presence, which was once a source of peace for Leo, had now become the epicenter of a conflict that threatened to destroy his little piece left. The boy felt trapped, with nowhere to run. Leo's grandmother, a woman of simple faith, began to see things in another way. She observed the interaction between the grandson and the bull. He saw the animal's kindness, the way he protected the boy, how he seemed to understand his words. She saw as Thunder lay near her hammock, riding guard as she slept. Initial distrust gave way to a feeling of astonishment. She remembered ancient stories told by her grandparents about forest spirits who assumed the form of animals to protect the pure from heart. Maybe Leo wasn't delirious. Perhaps that bull was, in fact, a blessing, a miracle. She began to defend her grandson with a new conviction, facing the gossip neighbors and the look of disapproval. "God sent an angel to protect my grandson, and he came in the form of a bull," she said to the astonishment of all. The old lady's faith was the only shield they had against the poison of distrust. Colonel Batista, frustrated by the impossibility of approaching the bull and the refusal of Leo to deliver it, decided to use the law to his advantage. He went to the city and returned with a bailiff and a document that gave him the right to recover his property. The order was clear. The bull should be seized and taken to the colonel's farm. If there was resistance, the use of the force was authorized. The day scheduled for the seizure arrived, and the village gathered to watch the show. It was David's struggle against Goliath, a poor boy and an elderly grandmother against the most powerful man in the region, backed by the law. The outcome seemed obvious and tragic. Leo was desperate. He hugged Thunder, the tears dripping down his dirty face. "I won't let them take you, Thunder. I won't," he whispered, his heart broken. The bull responded with a hot breath on his face, his eyes calm, as if he told him not to fear. When the colonel and his men approached, led by the officer, Thunder posted in front of Leo and his grandmother. He made no mention of attacking, did not snort or shave the paw to the floor. Just a mountain of black muscles was there, emanating a silent and unshakable authority. The horses of the henchmen retreated nervously, feeling the energy emanating from the bull. The men, used to dealing with cattle, hesitated. There was something in that non-natural animal that imposed a fearful respect. The bailiff, a city man, tried to argue. "Boy, the order is clear, don't make things harder." But Leo did not move, protected by the living wall that was his friend. The impasse graduated tense unto the strong sun of noon. The village watched in silence, distrust giving way to apprehensive curiosity. The mystery was about to unfold. It was then that something unexpected happened. An old man, the oldest village resident, a man who rarely spoke and all considered a little crazy, paved the way for the crowd. His eyes, turbid by age, settled into Thunder. He approached without fear and stopped a few meters from the animal. The old man raised a trembling hand and pointed out. His weak and hoarse voice echoed in silence. "This is not a Colonel Bull," he said. "This is the guardian of the trail. I saw him once, when he was a boy, just as he is. He only appears to those who have the pure heart and whom the forest chooses." A murmur toward the crowd. Colonel laughed, mockingly. Bullshit of old late. But the words of the elder, coming from such a distant memory, planted a new seed in the heart of the people. The seed of mystery. Legend. The distrust now struggled against the possibility of the sacred, and no one knew to believe. The proof of loyalty was about to happen. The clearing tension was palpable, a straight wire about to break. The words of the old man still hovered in the air, nixing superstition and hope to fear and greed. The Baptist colonel, however, was not a man to shake himself with legends. The mockery on his face became a cold fury. He saw his power being challenged by a boy, an old man, and an animal. That was an insult he could not tolerate. "No more clowning," he shouted, pulling a revolver from his waist. The cry of the crowd was drowned out by the sound of his authoritarian voice. "If this demon does not get out of my way, I send him to hell myself, and the thief boy goes along." He pointed the gun toward Thunder, his finger already at the trigger. Leo's grandmother shouted, trying to put herself in front, but Leo held her. Panic froze the boy's blood, but before he could have any reaction, Thunder acted. Not with violence, but with shocking intelligence. With a quick and accurate movement, Thunder did not invest against the colonel. Instead, he turned and gave a powerful kick, not in one person, but in an old rotten tree trunk that was nearby. The trunk, hollow and heavy, rolled with a crash, falling exactly on the way between the colonel and the group, raising a cloud of dust and barbs. It was not an act of attack, but a barrier, a controlled force demonstration, and amazing accuracy. The colonel's horse, frightened by the noise and the sudden movement, packed violently. Batista, caught by surprise, was thrown to the ground tightly. The weapon flew from his hand, falling into the grass several meters away. The henchmen, instead of helping the boss or attacking the bull, were paralyzed, gaping with the scene they just witnessed. The action of Thunder had been so fast, so calculated that it seemed choreographed. It was the definitive proof that they were not dealing with an ordinary animal. The colonel, lying on the floor, moaned in pain. His leg was at a foreign angle. He had broken her in the fall. The humiliation was visible on his face, mixed with pain and shock. Thunder, after creating the barrier, again posting herself calmly in front of Leo. He looked at the colonel on the floor, not aggressive, but with a kind of serene authority, like a king looking at a subject who dared to challenge him. The silence that followed was deep. No one dared to move. The people of the village, who once watched with suspicion, now looked at the black bull with a mix of fear and reverence. The words of the old man echoed in their minds. That was not animal behavior. It was something else. The loyalty of Thunder to Leo had been proven in a spectacular way, not through blind violence, but intelligent strategy and protection. He not only protected his friend, but also avoided a greater tragedy, disarming the situation without spilling a drop of blood. It was Leo who broke the spell. Seeing the fallen colonel and suffering, the compassion that was his essence spoke louder than fear or resentment. He broke away from the protection of Thunder and walked toward the man who had threatened to kill him. The crowd arrested her breath. "Don't approach, boy," shouted one of the henchmen, still stunned. But Leo continued. He took the water canteen he carried and knelt beside Bautista, offering him the water. The colonel, surprised and humiliated, looked into the boy's face, a dirty, thin face, but with eyes that conveyed a goodness he had never known. He hesitated, but thirst and pain were great. He accepted the water, drinking in desperate sips. That simple gesture of mercy, coming from the one he had so opposed, was a stronger blow to his pride than his own fall. He saw in the boy the same nobility he turns moments earlier in the bull. While Leo helped the colonel, Thunder remained vigilant, but calm. He observed each movement, ready to intervene if necessary, but trusted Leo. The scene was surreal. The poor boy taking care of the rich landowner under the protective look of the legendary bull. The bailiff, who had come to execute an order, was now there, not knowing what to do, the roll in his hand looking ridiculous in the face of the reality that unfolded. The henchman, without the boss's orders, just took care to improvise a stretcher to transport him. The proof of loyalty was not only Thunder to Leo, but also from Leo to his own principles. He refused to stoop to the level of cruelty of his oppressor. And this attitude, combined with the action of Thunder, completely changed the perception of the village. The distrust dissolved, replaced by an embarrassed admiration. They had badly judged the boy and the bull. The colonel's departure was melancholy and silent. Carried by his men, he did not say a word. He only gave Leo and Thunder a last look, a complex look where anger fought against a newly discovered respect. No one else spoke of grasping the bull. The bailiff's document was discreetly kept in the pocket. The legend of the Guardian of the Trail was reborn in full force, and Leo, the boy who was previously an outcast, was now seen as his chosen, someone special, clad by the magic of the forest. People approached no longer with stones, but with food offerings, with disguised apology in kind words. They looked at Thunder with a respect that bordered on worship. The bull, which was the reason for Leo's exclusion, was now the reason for his acceptance. His unshakable loyalty had transformed the fate of both. In the following days, Leo's life changed dramatically. He was no longer invisible. People greeted him, asked his opinion about time, brought gifts to his grandmother. They wanted to hear the story of how he had found Thunder, how he had survived in the woods. He became the local hero, the boy who tamed the beast, the Guardian's friend. But Leo remained humble. He knew the real hero was Thunder. His loyalty had been the rock on which his new life was being built. He took care of the bull with the same love and dedication as always, but now he no longer needed to hide. They could walk freely through the village, and people opened their way, smiling. Fear had given way to admiration. The forgotten trail, before a symbol of abandonment, was now the starting point of a story that everyone wanted to tell. The loyalty proof of Thunder had not only saved his lives, but he had also cured a wound in the village soul. They had taught them a lesson on hasty judgment, the courage of compassion, and the existence of mysteries that logic cannot explain. The relationship between the boy and the bull has become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the arid conditions, goodness can flourish and generate miracles. The presence of Thunder brought a new energy to the place, a sense of protection, as if the Guardian were actually watching over them all. Life was still tough, poverty was still a reality, but now there was a living legend between them, proof that they were not completely forgotten around the world. Leo, however, felt that the story was not yet complete. The mystery about the origin of Thunder remained, and Colonel Batista's gaze being taken away was not of complete defeat, but something else, something he could not decipher. He felt that the biggest challenge, the final revelation, was yet to come. The proof of loyalty was the climax of an act, but not the end of the play. He sat with Thunder at the end of the day, looking at the distant mountains, and wondered what the destination still reserved. The bull, as always, seemed calm, but there was a spark in his wise eyes, a knowledge of future things that the boy could not yet understand. The reward for his pure heart was on his way, and she would come from where he least expected, forever sealing his fate and that of his loyal friend. "It's been a few weeks," since the confrontation with the colonel. Life in the village had found a new normality, one in which the presence of a legendary bull and his human guardian was an accepted and celebrated fact. Leo and his grandmother no longer needed. The neighbors always shared the little they had, in a gesture of gratitude and respect. Thunder was the attraction of the place, but an attraction treated with reverence. No one dared to touch him without Leo's permission, and the children told fantastic stories about their deeds. The boy, however, was not carried out by fame. His heart was still pure, his dedication to Thunder unchanged. He still saw in his friend not a trophy or a miracle, but the companion who had saved his life and gave him a purpose. The biggest reward for him was already having the friendship of Thunder. But fate had other plans, a material reward that would come to validate the richness of his spirit. One day, a different carriage, much more luxurious than any vehicle ever seen in those stops, appeared on the dusty road that led to the village. From her descended a man with gray hair, thin clothes, and an air of nobility that contrasted with the simplicity of the place. He was not from the region. He asked for the boy who walks with the black bull. The people, now protector of their hero, indicated the way with some distrust. The man introduced himself to Leo and his grandmother with impeccable education. His name was Mr. Arthur, and he was a cattle breeder of a distant province. He told a story that left Leo with a tight heart. Years ago, his property had been invaded by thieves, and his most valuable good, a young bull from a legendary and ancient lineage called Ebony Heart, had been stolen. The lineage was famous not by strength or aggressiveness, but for its extraordinary intelligence and loyalty. Mr. Arthur described the stolen bull in detail. He mentioned a small, almost imperceptible white spot in star-shaped, which the animal had behind the right ear. Leo's heart fired. He had never noticed that. With the permission of the man, he ran to Thunder, who fired nearby. With shaking hands, he pushed the dark, dense behind the bull ear. And there she was, a small, unmistakable star-shaped white spot. But tears came in Leo's eyes. It was a mixture of joy and sadness. Joy for finally unraveling the mystery of the origin of Thunder, knowing that he was as special as he had always felt, and a deep, overwhelming sadness, realizing the Thunder had an owner, that he had come to pick him up. The fear of losing your best friend was a physical pain, a sharp twinge in his chest. Had he fought so much to keep him safe, and now would he have to deliver him? Mr. Arthur, seeing the anguish on the boy's face, approached slowly. He did not look at Thunder with the greed of an owner, but with the emotion of those who meet a loved one. "I searched for him for years," said the man, the embargoed voice. "I thought I would never see him again." Thunder, hearing the man's voice, turned his head. He stared at him for a long moment, and then, to Leo's astonishment, he walked to Mr. Arthur and brushed his head in askant, in a gesture of recognition and affection. That gesture sealed the truth. Leo sat on the floor, desolate, his head between his hands. It was all over. His journey with Thunder had come to an end. Leo's grandmother hugged him, crying softly along with her grandson. The village, which had gathered again, watched the scene with a compassionate heart. It seemed a cruelty of fate. The reward of one was the loss of the other. But Mr. Arthur was not like Colonel Batista. He was a righteous man. He observed the scene, the boy's genuine suffering, the visible bond between him and the bull. He knelt beside Leo. "My young man," he said, with a soft voice, "I heard the stories about you. I heard how you found this noble animal on the brink of death, how you took care of it, how you protected him, how he risked his own life for him. The name of his lineage is Ebony Heart, but a bull like this, is no owner. He chooses his mate, and it is clear to me that he chose you." Leo lifted his face, eyes full of tears and unbelief. "What do you mean?" he whispered. "I mean," continued Mr. Arthur, "that I came to seek my bull, But I found something much more valuable. Proof that loyalty and purity of heart still exist in this world. An animal like this cannot be bought or sold, said Mr. Arthur, getting up and telling everyone to hear. Your value is not in money, but in your spirit, and your spirit belongs to this boy. He then made a proposal that shocked everyone. I will not take the bull. He is where he belongs, with his true friend. But such a noble guardian deserves to live in a worthy place, and a boy with such a pure heart deserves a future. He offered to buy the lands around the shack of Leo, creating a small reserve so that Thunder could live in peace. He offered to rebuild his grandmother's house to ensure that Leo had access to the best studies so that he would never be hungry again. It was not a payment, he stressed, but a reward. A reward of fate delivered by his hands by the act of disinterested kindness that Leo had practiced that afternoon on the Forgotten Trail. The joy that exploded in Leo's heart was indescribable. He would not have to separate from Thunder. He could give a better life to his grandmother. He could study, dream of a future. It all seemed like a dream. He embraced Thunder tightly, and the bull moved gently as he shared his happiness. The reward for your pure heart was not just the permanence of your friend, but the complete transformation of your life. The goodness he had planted, by saving a life, flourished, and returned to him in a centuplicate way. Colonel Batista from his farm heard the news with a mixture of bitterness and perhaps a small spark of redemption. He had learned in the hardest way that there are riches that money cannot buy and that power cannot earn. The Forgotten Trail, the place where it all began, was renamed by the village people. He was renamed Pure Heart Trail. It became a place of pilgrimage where people went to remember the story of the boy and the bull, to be inspired by his example of compassion and loyalty. The clay hood has been replaced by a simple but comfortable house, a green pasture, and surrounded guaranteed the safety of Thunder, although he always preferred to be close to Leo. The boy went to school and proved to be a brilliant student, but never lost his humility. Every day, upon returning, his first stop was in the pasture, to talk to his best friend, the guardian who had taught him the most important lessons in life. And so the story ended, but the legend remained. The legend of a poor boy who, having nothing, offered everything he could, his time, his care, his love. And in return, he received not only the loyalty of a magnificent creature, but a new destination, a new life. The reward for his pure heart was not a golden chest at the end of a rainbow, but something much more lasting: peace, safety, and the unshakable company of a true friend. And they lived, the boy who became a man and the bull who was more than an animal, side by side, like a living testimony that the greatest of all treasures is goodness, and that an act of compassion, however small, can indeed change the world, or at least the small piece of world that we are fortunate to call home.